It's so important, like when you're in an environment which, you know, is artistic and creative, you have to be able to stand your ground. And I think from both sides, you know, if an actor's like, you know, corpsing, or they've got the giggles and or they don't know their lines, and like there's a point where, like, you know, maybe that's fun, but then there's also, you know, we're here to work, and that's the kind of sweet spot where you find someone who you think is a really decent person who you can get the work done with, and then you can also like have a glass of wine and be like, yeah, after work, yeah, we did it, like we that was a good day, and like, let's go and do it again tomorrow.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Tuppence Middleton is an actor. She sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work.
Is there a typical way you like to begin your preparation process for a role?
I'd say the first thing is always mining the script. I think because I come from an English training, then the first thing that we do when we're training here at drama school is you kind of attack the script first. So when you come from a theatre background, which most people do when they go through a typical kind of drama school 3 or 4 year training, then we were taught to almost action our script. So, you know, you're given lots of different methods at drama school, and I think that people tend to cherry pick what works for them. But the thing I always thought was really useful initially was to write down everything that any other character says about your character, and then everything your character says about themselves, and everything your character says about other characters, in a really kind of basic, prescriptive kind of way. You start to build this picture of who this person is in other people's eyes and also in their own eyes. So I find really useful as just using the source material that you have, because even if the character is based on a real life person, then there might be limited information available. And although I really like to do the research, then that's not always possible. So I think what you have as a concrete start is always the script. And I think usually when I start reading, someone will immediately come to mind. Like I will think of someone in my life who this character reminds me of, or elements of their personality. And then that starts to build this picture in your head, like, oh, maybe their voice sounds a little more like this, or maybe it has this person's accent, or maybe they walk like my friend so-and-so, you know, and you start to build this picture. And if it's something which is completely alien to you, then that's almost even more exciting, because then you get to create something from scratch.
And does that go for accents too? Like when an accent is not your own, is that helpful?
Yes, actually, I'd say I almost prefer not working in my own accent, because although I tend to do that more, of course, and most people do, then there's something that immediately puts that distance between you and the character. And although it's really useful to find those things that connect you, that help you to relate and understand that character, that I also think as an actor, in order to feel like you're sort of stepping into someone else's shoes and to feel different when you first step foot on that set, then I think that that's a really useful thing. I always really like, I mean, for example, on my latest film, Mank, I originally went up for a British part, and then sent my self-tape off into the ether, as always happens, and you think you're not going to hear anything from it. And then a few months later, they came back and said, we'd love you to read for Sara, which was an American part. And I actually preferred that idea. I thought, great, this is a chance to do something different and to work on a different accent and to feel less like myself, which I think is kind of what actors are always after anyway. They always, I mean, that's always the draw, is to live a life other than the one that you know. That's the kind of beauty and the exciting thrill of it.
That must be why I'm a terrible actor, because I love myself so much.
You don't think you can improve on yourself at all?
No, and I don't want to play anybody else. I mean, why would I want to play somebody else? I mean, this I'm so
Oh, well, like the
great.
opposite. That's so funny. Yeah, no, I would, any chance to be another person, I think is so much fun.
When you're playing like Sara Mankiewicz or Mary Edison, these people on the periphery of the person that the biographies are written about, do you dive in full force on those biographies of the men because it's all you can really get essentially of this person?
Yeah, it kind of is often like that because unfortunately there wasn't a lot written about Sara Mankiewicz. There wasn't nothing. I mean, I definitely had some source material, especially there's a great book that Gary loaned to me when I first got to rehearsals called Mank. It's not the basis of the script, but it's a great book by Richard Merriman, and it's a really good source for Mank and Sara's life before Hollywood and how they met and their kind of journey from a young couple in love to the sort of dizzy heights of the golden age of Hollywood, like going to all of the biggest parties, being best friends with the most influential people in the studio system. Then it kind of, it gives you a picture of how that happened. And I suppose for me, it gave me an idea of what Sara had expected from her life in a sense that I don't think she expected it to go that way. So it was a real, you know, I think she considered it a blessing and really exciting, but also there were massive downsides to it. She had to deal with watching her husband kind of spiral into alcohol addiction and lose his way in order to achieve greatness. And yeah, so I think often because of the nature of those figures, I mean, unfortunately, it's often men that people focus on in the story. But I think what I liked about Fincher's script was that it was also about the women around him, how influential they were, and how I think really behind these great men or women, but man in this case, there is always a very grounding voice of reason, and Sara was definitely that for Mank throughout their life.
I'm going to get back to Mank, but when I talk to somebody that has your kind of training in theater and your experience in theater, I always want to ask how important, now that you are doing much more film screen work, how important really and truly was that experience on the stage?
I mean, it's a strange thing because like I said, that was what I trained in when I was at school. But almost as soon as I left, I've done 95% film and TV. So yeah, of course I use those building blocks, but film's a visual medium, and it's not about you're not in an auditorium which is full of 500, 1,000 people where your voice has to hit the back row, and so therefore the words are the most important thing, and your voice is like an instrument. You don't use your voice in the same way as you do in the theatre. So I absolutely am out of practice with doing that. There's no doubt. And I think that with film, I felt that I really learnt the art of being on camera and that style of acting only by doing it. I don't think, the school I went to had a very good film department, and it was very 50-50 in the film and theatre training. But the thing that gave me, I think, was more of an appreciation of the job that everyone does, the collaborative aspect of filmmaking, because we were made to crew our films. So everyone takes it in turns to light it, to be DOP, to direct it, to do makeup and costume. So you learn the role of every job. So you kind of know then, even though you're training to be an actor, that to not walk onto set thinking that you're the most important person there, because you're not. Because yes, you're the person in front of the camera, but there's the reason this whole thing is getting made is because of the hard work of a group of people, and it's a collaborative medium. So that I really learned from the training. But I think in terms of how to be on camera, I really only learned that in practice by doing it. And you start to realize what works and what doesn't. And, I feel fortunate that I had a kind of slow burn after I left drama school. And I worked steadily, but it wasn't like I was thrown into a Marvel film or something, and I think it's such a cruel thing in a way as an actor, because you don't get a chance to hone your craft, to work out what your tastes are in filmmaking, to work out what sort of thing you want to work on, where you want your career to go. Like, you don't have that time if you are sort of catapulted into stardom at a very early stage and a very young age as well. So I feel that you only really start to know what sort of actor you want to be and what kind of films you want to make just by doing as much as you can.
Part of the heartbreaking thing of doing this show, I was telling you about all the good things in my prelude, but the heartbreaking thing is sitting down, doing research on somebody I'm going to talk to, and then realizing certain films existed that I did not know about. I'm in the film, circles here. I only have one reaction. It's like anger. It's anger. I don't have like curiosity. Why? I just get angry. So I'm very angry when I watched Disappearance at Clifton Hill. because when I watched the trailer, I said, that is a well-directed movie. I could see it in the trailer. Mm-hmm. I watched it and I'm like, why did I not hear about this movie? So tell me about Albert Shin. Am I wrong about him being a great director? Because this feels like there was a strong vision, but it felt like the actors were able to live in the roles and in that vision.
Yeah, it was so interesting working with Albert because I received the script and then I watched his first feature. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a Korean language film. He's raised in Toronto, but he is originally Korean, and his first, I don't know, he'd done shorts before that, but then his first feature length was Korean language, and it's called In Her Place. And it was a really beautiful, slow, kind of meditative, but very dark film about this teenage girl who is pregnant and her relationship with the women around her. And it was really, it was so delicately told that when I read this script, it was so different. The genre was so different. And it was such a departure from what I had seen in that film. I was immediately intrigued to speak to him because I couldn't believe this was the same voice in a way. And I'm always really interested when directors do that early on in their career. They're like, it's not like they're trying on different styles, but it's like they're always experimenting, and it's not like they're locked into, oh, this is the way that I make films and I make everything, I whip pan everything and everything's always like heavy pinks or whatever, it's like it was, to me, that's a really big draw. So I loved the script because I thought it was totally bonkers and a bit kind of Lynchian, and I was really interested in the fact that both of his films, this one and his previous film, had followed female protagonists. I always love when men write women really well, because it's not always easy to do. And yeah, I thought he had found a really interesting character in Abby, and also it was based on a kind of strange memory of his from real life of when he was a child, and he thought he witnessed another child being kidnapped and put into the boot of a car, and then he retold this story as he got older, and realized that the story kind of changed and warped, and he couldn't quite trust his memory, and then this sort of character of the unreliable narrator who is a compulsive liar kind of came out of that memory, and I was so fascinated to learn that, and and then he was like, David Cronenberg's on board, and so I was like, where do I sign?
I mean, mark my words. So these podcasts are going to outlive us, hopefully. So I want everyone that hearing this, I'm saying this in 2020. Mark my words on Disappearance at Clifton Hill. Okay? Mark my words. I know this stuff. I'm sorry. I might be an angry and a snob, but I trust myself. Like I said before, I like myself. I trust myself.
Yes. I love a film snob, but they're my favorite.
Yeah. Okay, good. To keep the snobbery going.
Yes.
I want you to change my mind about David Fincher, okay? Because I've had a lot of people on my show that have worked with him, and they all love him. They all love him. And by the way, I want everyone has to see Mank. I mean, everyone has to see Mank. Mm-hmm. People that I've had on my show, they tell stories with a smile. Yeah. And if they weren't telling them with a smile, and I just wrote down these stories, I would be like, this is an abusive dude. I mean, like the... I always say, like, but you liked it. You liked this. Like, he's good. They're like, oh, he's amazing. I love him. It just doesn't fit with my actor's director definition. Yeah. So but it seems like people keep saying he is.
Yeah, I would say that I suppose he's famous for the multiple take thing, which I think sometimes gets like misconstrued in a way that certainly when I heard about it the first time, I'd assumed it was going to be like a Kubrick-esque 5-day beatdown where, you know, that you will not be allowed out of the building until you've like cried your last tear, and you know, that's what I was expecting and sort of terrified of. And it wasn't like that at all, because yes, he does multiple takes, but it felt like the camera was always rolling. So he would come in between takes. And what I think, I mean, I don't claim to know his method, but to me, what it did as an actor is it eliminated the time you have between takes to kind of over-analyze and overthink a note. Yes. So it was almost like the takes went really, really quickly. So it was like 25, 30 takes, but they were just like right off the back of each other. And you don't realize you've done so many. So it doesn't feel like you're being punished. It's just like you're tweaking, but he doesn't want you to... It's like he wants it to be instinct and not kind of, oh, I'm going to make this face on this line and I'm going to, you know... So that's how I read it. And I actually... Because I'm one of those people that I really enjoyed working with him. And I do think he has this kind of, which is maybe what you have read in the stories. He almost has this like, to me, like it felt like a kind of football coach dad. Like, you know, when you, you, like tough love, like I didn't find him, he was so gentle with me. And I think, you know, everyone else on the set would agree on Mank. Absolutely. But that's how I read it, is that I really respond to like someone wanting you to do your best. And it feels like he's cheering you on from the sidelines. It's like you're, you know, like, get in there, do it. But it's not like it was never aggressive. That was never my feeling about it. But I think he really, really cares. And the reason I think, I mean, I don't know whether you were talking about having heard stories about him on set, or whether you meant about his previous films in terms of like convince me. But I think that for me, this film was so different to any of his other films. It was like in the same thing that I was talking about with Albert Shin, and I suddenly saw a different genre. I thought like, oh, if I saw a trailer for this, I wouldn't think it was Fincher. Right. Like it's just like a really, I think it's a real departure for him. And actually, when I look back on his films, they are all, I think he's one of those people that doesn't, you know, like stick to one style. He tries so many different genres and different ways of shooting, and is always interested in the camera. You know, he's such a kind of like a champion of digital and you know, really knows his stuff. So for him, I think to go back and emulate an era which was so much about film and you know, shoot it on digital and light everything. You know, what was crazy was that we would turn up on set most days and the DOP, Eric, would be like, don't look at the lights. Because he was always like worried that we were going to think it looked bad. Because he was like, I'm lighting for black and white, so it looks bad, but it's going to look amazing on camera. Like, please don't look at it. Like he was really... so that was a really interesting thing, because I'd never seen anyone light for black and white. So we would walk in and it would be this really kind of stark, strange... And he was like, it's not going to look like that, please. So that was cool to watch them both kind of geek out over that.
You were saying that it's very important for an actor to know that they are not the most important thing on the set. And I'm imagining someone that's going to have a hard time on a David Fincher film is somebody that thinks they're the most important thing on the set. Because, was there anyone that you were seeing, and then this could segue into just working with Gary Oldman a lot, and I'm assuming he wasn't like this, but is there anyone that you were seeing, and you don't have to name names, that had to kind of adjust to this and realize this is about a lot of things. This guy knows what's in this frame, and I am not the most important thing in this frame. For
a start, it's really, it's Gary's film, and then there is like a great ensemble cast around. So I think all of us in the ensemble knew what we were making, and I think that he doesn't want to work with people who are like that. I think so. I think actually everyone was like really professional and kind of felt like consummate, old timers, like just so many pros. So it didn't feel like. Of course I've worked with people like that before, who don't really understand that concept. And it seems to always be when there are like a million other things going on, or there's a scene which is like someone's big scene where they're having a breakdown, and then another actor is like insistent on like, but can I? And you can see the director trying to really politely be like, maybe this I'm not so much in this scene, but trying to like very politely explain, but no, not on this film. And also I think that what you often find is that your kind of protagonist or your lead it usually kind of filters down from the top. Like if that person is a good, decent, like humble person, then that sort of it drips down. You kind of can't then come in and be, number 47 on the call list and then just, be a nightmare. I always think that person sets the example. And so if you have that person who's at the center of it, who is like causing trouble, then it just it's like contagious. But I think, when someone like Gary is at the center, then there's like no chance of that happening, because he's just he's really just ordinary. Sounds like I'm saying that's a bad thing, but he's just really down to earth, like really cool.
I filmed something with a bunch of people last year, and 3 people, and these are actors. They all showed up not knowing their lines at all. So I have this code that I go by that is unwavering now, that everything is the director's fault. Everything. Mm-hmm. Everything is the director's fault. But I couldn't all this past year, I couldn't connect that. How could that be my fault? And I came up with it just this week. And it's because I was offered something to act in something, and my initial thing was that place is not a safe ground, I felt. Mm-hmm. For me to deliver whatever it was in my small town world that I was going to deliver there. And that was my thing. And I think that these people didn't feel, and it's not about safety, it wasn't worthy. I didn't create a worthy enough space for them to work. And I want to know if this has ever come across your mind in this mystical way of, as you develop this craft and think what is worthy for you. It sounds so egotistical, but I really don't think it is. It's like you have something. It's very precious, and the whole act of putting it in the director's hand, because they're going to do something with this later on, and the idea of it being unsafe or unworthy, does that ever go through your decision-making process?
I think that there is like a mutual respect that has to happen, which the more I work, the more I think it's important to set that up from the very start. Like, I think that I would not dream of turning up on set and not knowing my lines. For one, I would feel horribly unprepared, and I would feel so nervous, and ruining potentially a day's work for a lot of people. So I think that that's what you offer your director, is to be fully prepared, but also to be kind of malleable enough that if something changes, that, so those lines so well that whatever is thrown at you on that day is you lose the light an hour quicker than you thought you were going to, something, one of the cameras break, whatever, then you can do something quickly, and you can you can be loose around it. But then I think in the other sense of it, I suppose the thing that I've learned as well is that there is such a temptation when you're around other people who are interesting and funny and charismatic and passionate about the same things that you're passionate about, that it's kind of like fun. It's a fun job, and so everyone loves to be on set, and it's really great. But I think to also remember that you are working on something, and to not blur those lines. Not that you can't be, of course you can be friends with the people you work with, and that's the most amazing thing, is when you get to form those professional relationships, and then you go on to work again with them, because you realize that not only do you really like them as people, but you also work well with them. But I think initially, you're if you're lucky, you're working with people that you love and respect, but you also have to respect them. So if you say no to something, that means no. Or if you you can have an adult professional conversation about something. So I think that when you become friendly before you've established that professional respect, I think then that's difficult. I know maybe I'm being really vague here, but I think that the more I get, it's so important. Like, when you're in an environment which is artistic and creative, you have to be able to stand your ground. And I think from both sides, if an actor's like, corpsing, or they've got the giggles or they don't know their lines, and like there's a point where like, maybe that's fun, but then there's also, we're here to work, and that's the kind of sweet spot where you find someone who you think is a really decent person who you can get the work done with, and then you can also like have a glass of wine and be like, yeah, after work, yeah, we did it. Like we that was a good day, and like, let's go and do it again tomorrow.
I discovered a song that is like almost sacred to me, and then there was a documentary. It's by this band called the Avett Brothers, and Judd Apatow made a documentary about them, and I watched it the other night, and the entire recording of this song is on film. Like I think it's the take. It's the song being recorded, and we're watching it being recorded, and they walk. We see them like leave, right? They need to take a break after it. It's so powerful. It's like this guy was going through a divorce, and you can tell a lot of that is built in the song, but it's about death. And so it's all this heavy stuff. They go outside, and the camera follows them, and the cameraman says, "So why was this so emotional for you?" And he says, "It's very troubling when right after they got done recording that song, people were saying, 'Good job. That was a great job.'" Mm-hmm. And they were saying outside like how they want to say like, "Good job." Do you know what pain I had to go through?
Yeah.
To do that. And I started thinking about actors. I started thinking like, oh my God, we haven't been like this patting on the back after this thing that they have to go through. They're using themselves in this way. And then we say, "Good job." And it's just this weird thing that I never thought about before. And so I just wanted to know from an actor, like, I mean, you can talk about what that means for you, but I really want to know, like, what is the proper thing to say when you just used your pain that could be so deep into your childhood there, for this art, that we're all going to benefit from. And like, what is the proper thing to say?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I always really found it strange if you did theatre and people then like clap at the end. Because if the end is like someone's blown their brains out and it's really like awful, tragic ending, it's like, why are we all clapping? This is terrible. Like, you should let it hang in the air and everyone should just walk out. But I mean, that's really dramatic. But I think, I actually don't know if you have to say anything. I mean, I think like I've had it where, I've like spoken to a director the next day and they've said, hey, great work yesterday or whatever. But what I always think is really nice is when I feel the most sort of, I suppose, like supported but not encroached upon is like just a look, or just even like I've had like, someone like just squeezes your shoulder and is like, yeah, like just a smile, like something small. It's like really, not as a sort of pat on the back, but it's like because I think often you don't need to say anything because I think the actor feels awkward about it too. Like because it's like they forget for a moment that they're on a set full of people and then like it's cut and then, okay, moving on. Everyone's like busy, moving cameras, doing all of this stuff. And then suddenly you're left in this slightly strange, like naked state of mind where you feel a bit exposed and like, oh, what did I just do? Was that, oh, maybe I should go and hide in a hole for a second. So I think that you almost, I mean, maybe some people do, but I almost feel like, oh, I don't even need anyone to say anything, like, because you feel a bit sort of exposed at that point, I think, right afterwards.
I've heard you say that you're kind of a loner and quarantine has actually been kind of nice for you in a way. And
yeah, it's been great.
In a similar way with me too. I mean, I'm with my wife, but me and my wife both don't like to do anything, and now we don't have guilt. It's like the guilt is gone.
Yes.
And but it's starting to get to the point where like just creative work is starting to get like, I guess there's hope for vaccines and everything now finally. But I was just wondering when you're not working, like what do you do to feed that inner artist in you? And especially during times like this, where maybe we're going back to work now. I don't know if you're on something, but for a while there was no work, and you had been on this run of lots of work, and suddenly being without it. What did you do to keep feeding that inner being?
Well, I went, I did what I'm sure lots of people did, which was, read as much as I can, catch up on books and films that I hadn't seen for a while or that I hadn't seen at all. And but that still doesn't like scratch the itch. So I felt, and I tried lots of different things. I tried painting for a bit, and I tried actually one of my friends, who's another actor, she had a kingfisher fly into her window at home and said, do you want me to send it to you? Because it's dead outside of my door, and I do taxidermy. So I said, yes, send it to me. So I thought, well, that's something creative I can do. But actually, I feel like I've been I've been thinking more and more about like, what do I want for my career in the future? And I definitely, which has always been something I've wanted to do, but I suppose it sort of solidified a bit more in lockdown, that I'd love to direct. I would love to write and direct my own work. And because I think that, there is a certain amount that's satisfying about being an actor. But I think actors are also storytellers, and, it doesn't always happen, but quite often they have their own vision for something. And that's always been something I wanted to do. So I think that I was much more, I don't know, like bullheaded about it this time around. I felt like, okay, so then sit down and write, a writer writes. So write something and then maybe like start trying to develop it. It's, you just do it. You have to just do it. So I feel like I was tougher on myself with that, which is good, because I definitely can fall victim to procrastination. So I need to give myself a kick up the bum sometimes.
Tuppence Middleton, thank you so much.
Thank you. So nice to chat to you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.